Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday Build. This is episode 1.31, and today we're going to be discussing the topic how to know what you don't know, strategies for troubleshooting and doing things you've never done, featuring buttons, testing environments, tiers, and patience. So, my name is Brittany Hernandez. I am a veteran of the US military. I'm also a lawyer, a founder, and CEO. I also have a master's degree with distinction in international film business. I am a no-code, low-code developer and Gavel expert, as well as the global ambassador to law schools for Gavel, formerly Documate. So I've done lots of different fun things, but I really wanted to get started right away in this particular topic because there's a lot to cover. So let's go ahead and get started right away. So as I mentioned, we're going to be discussing the topic, how to know what you don't know. So I've often found that in anything you do in life, you're going to have enough knowledge to get you to a certain point, but there's going to be that place where you get stuck and you need to kind of troubleshoot your way through, especially when it comes to things like development. When you're developing something either as a coder or as somebody who uses no code tools or a hybrid approach or whatever else. Now, even when I was practicing full-time as a lawyer, I would still have this base of knowledge and base of expertise, but maybe people would come to me with questions that I didn't know the answers to right away. And I needed to go and do research and do all the lawyerly things of trying to find the cases that match up correctly with this particular scenario and then argue a case for one way or another. So just know that you have and can develop the set of skills and the library of knowledge that you need in order to overcome challenges and roadblocks when you're trying to do something that you've never done before. So I'm going to go through a couple of different examples and along the way give you some tips and strategies that feature these different kinds of testing environments, buttons, tiers, and patience. So I'm actually going to do this in a little bit of a different order. I'm going to start with testing environments because the first tip that I have is that I want you to start small when you're trying to troubleshoot something. So in this particular example, I wanted to highlight the fact that when I'm testing a very particular thing, when I get blocked on something specific or someone has a specific question that they're trying to work out, I want to start with the smallest version of that problem that I can troubleshoot from there. Now, in this particular example, you can see from my Gavel website, for example, my particular dashboard, you can see a lot of things they test on them. Clio test, CSS test. I have, let's see, what else do I have? Push test. I have test, 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 test. So I have test button styling, test other parties involved, Clio custom field plus Zapier, test template within a template, test variable logic and automated email, test Gavel, Zapier, Clio. So I'm just testing push test, push test, push test, workflow 1, 2, 3. So I'm testing all the time. And I usually have a section called testing environment where I can just test one quick thing. But what I notice a lot of the time is that I want to refer back to something that I've tested before. So I don't necessarily want to have it erased. So that's why I've split them up in this particular way so that I can refer back to that very specific thing that I did in the past. So I don't have to try to go through this whole process of trying to find it again. So I highly recommend that you do that and allow time and space for this testing process. So I'm going to show you a couple of these different tests and to show you why I've broken them down and how I've broken them down into a very specific piece of information. In the Clio test example here, I literally have a just 2-question workflow. One is for matter and one is for contact. This is connected to a demo account in Clio, so it doesn't have any client information, but it will show you what I'm trying to do in this particular example. So these are all just pretend fake people and contacts, so don't worry. So if we go into the back end of this Clio test, what I've tried to accomplish is one, I was trying to figure out why my Clio account wasn't connecting. So I reached out to the Gavel help team, asked them to help troubleshoot with me why my particular account wasn't working. We were able to work it out together. But as I was just testing, when I first linked it up, I just put one matter question and one contact question for Clio just to see if these two things work before I try to start putting them inside of bigger and bigger and bigger workflows. Although when you're using Clio matters and contacts variables and like question blocks, you're probably not going to have like super long ones because a lot of those different variables have already been created for you. And you can use custom fields within that as well. Also, within this particular example, I was trying to do what's called kind of give myself a master reference template with all of the Clio variables in this output document. So what I did here was I wanted to see what it looks like when I insert all of the different variables that are available to me when I use a Clio matter type, and all of the different variables that are available to me and what they look like when I use a Clio contact question. Now, one of the other tips that you can pull from here is around seeing. So seeing as far as like visually seeing the output of something will help you to be able to actually overcome or proactively overcome challenges in the future. Because what that means is you're going to be able to build faster and more accurately when you've actually visually seen and know what to expect when certain actions are taken. So in this particular case, when I run this particular example, let's say I use matter 00001 for Qureshi, and this contact is going to actually be not the person associated with this matter. It's going to be a different person, and I just want to see the differences in their information. So literally, those are the only two questions that I have. And when I say continue, the output is going to be all of the different variable combinations that are available for matters and contacts. And I just wanted to see what happens when I use these. So this is part of that kind of testing environment. This is part of that idea that we're just trying to understand and see what are our options. So in the Word add-in, when you're using Clio variables in these different ways, you'll see that there is a list of different, I'm just going to sign in really quick. You're going to see that there is a list. Let me go to this one here. If you go to simple variables, if you just insert all of them, you can do that and just say insert all variables, and you see all of the ones that are available to you. But in my case, I actually went through and hand did all of these different ones in order, and I broke them up into different sections so I could see section by section like what's available. So I can see this kind of general information about the matter. I can see those stuff about an originating attorney, the responsible attorney, the user, the client for that particular matter, the number of clients, addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, and related contacts, their primary work address, their information about all of these different secondary addresses, the company that they're associated with, and more. When we go to the contact variable options, I can see all this information about this particular person. And part of the reason why I wanted to do this is the name that, like, for example, the variable names that Clio has given this particular set of data is different than maybe how I would do it. So I wouldn't necessarily call name just name. I would be more specific. I would say something like first name, middle name, and last name, something like that, or first name, middle initial, last name, or first and last name, no middle name, or something that's more specific about what this is. So I wanted to see this. So when I'm actually using this, I know what to expect for how this is going to behave. So if we refer back over to the matter part and we go under to where it's talking about the client, we can see the last name and we can say the full name. So Sohail Ali Qureshi is the full name, but also is that same name variable that's being used down here. So what we can see from this is that when somebody doesn't have a middle name, it's just their first and last name. But when they do have a middle name, the name variable shows their first name, their middle name, and their last name. So that's good information for me to know. And that's one of the ways that I can front load the work of trying to troubleshoot in advance how to use this different information. Also formatting, how is an address formatted? So we have the street. So we have 123 Sohail Home Street, apartment 1. And also how does that output? How can I play with it? How can I modify these different pieces of information and so on? So that's just one small example of where I'm taking one test and I'm just trying to figure out this one very specific thing. And then I'm also starting with this idea that I want to see and be able to then expect certain things to happen. Another one here would be around CSS tests. So in this particular example, I was trying to see how I could change different parts of this from colors and fonts without having to go through the whole process of using like AWS and Bootswatch? How could I actually code from within the actual Gabble framework itself without having to kind of go outside of it, you could say. So this one was really interesting. This came from a question from the Slack group where somebody was saying, how did this person change the font and change the colors of the buttons? So in this particular example, I took some experience that I had with a course called She Codes Basics. So this is a really great program that teaches you how to code a little bit, in the sense that this is the basics one where they go over basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I remembered from here that you can use something called the inspect tool to look at the underlying values and code. So if you come here and you say inspect, I can see on the back end what's actually happening here and what each section is, what's happening in each section. So what I did here was I also used that same knowledge that I learned from She Codes Basics about how you write CSS, which is the styling. So I understood that as well. I understood that that's usually in the head and that's usually under style. And that what you needed to do was really need to know how to pinpoint or where to pinpoint the underlying class that's been given to a particular section that you want to change. So I was thinking back to that particular section and those things that I learned in this particular course, and I was just kind of playing and testing with different things. So I was looking for these two sections, this button down here. I was looking for how, so you can see here that the class that they've given this button is button primary. So I went over here to button primary. And actually, if you notice, this particular part here looks a little bit different than the part that's here on the left that's highlighted. If you look over here, when I cover this, you'll see that the spaces have been turned into periods, and you can see how this form is. And that's what I used to pinpoint the specific class. So I'm able to pinpoint the specific class by using this period here, then going to that, speaking directly to that particular class and section, and then I'm giving it a different background color than the default. So I'm overriding the default. The same thing here with the nav link active, the last, that one here is referring that to that section up here at the top. So if I come back over here and I inspect this one here, then I can see that section as well, and the class being nav link active, the last, or whatever it is. Yeah, the last. So that is how I was able to change the background color here. For the page header and the body text or font, how to change that, I did the same method where I was inspecting a specific section, for example, and I went in and looked for the class for these different sections. So in this one, for example, I'm looking at a class called the page header. So I've got the page header, and then I specifically looked at the H1 in that section. And then I came up with this font family Avenir, which is the one that the person wanted to try. And then same thing here for the body. So I was just looking for the body for this section here to change the different, so the different section for here as well. So you can go through that same process of understanding what you know, trying out different things. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is like a perfect solution, because obviously in this case, maybe I would prefer to find a way that I can get all of the different CSS that's underlying here or that I want to use, and then just change the style with custom CSS with a URL. But in this particular case, you just wanted to change these very small specific things. So this is one way that somebody could do that. So that's how I've been testing like tiny things along the way, using these smaller testing environments where this particular workflow only has one page and has one question. And it's just so that I can have something to work off of. It's not some big long thing, and it's not the main thing. That's the main thing that I want to get across is don't use your real active, like robust, fully built out workflow to test something. So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you want to try this one thing where you're trying how to add a button, or you're trying to change the CSS style, or you want to see what happens when you do this one thing or another thing, or you want to try some invisible logic. It can get really in the weeds, and you can make it to where you actually, mess up or break and have to then go back and redo something that you made. Now, if you needed to see how something from your more advanced workflow would function, what I would recommend is to make a copy. So you can easily duplicate a workflow here, and then I would do the changes in the copy to test it. And if it doesn't work, scrap it. If it does work, you can either make that one, if it's still in progress and you haven't put that link anywhere, you can have them merge into a single one. You can have that one be the one that you then work off of, from that in the future. There's lots of different ways you can do that, but I wouldn't work solely from like a master version. I would work off of a copy or some smaller version of what you're trying to do. So like I said, if you have gone through and done a lot of different work and you need those pieces to be in place, and it's not practical for you to, or it's not useful for you to break this down to a really small piece, then go ahead and duplicate it, do your tests and changes, but do that in still this testing environment and not in your master templates. So the next one I wanted to show you goes into this idea of buttons. So there was a test that I did called button styling. And this also came from a person who was in the Slack group in the community, which you can join for free, by the way. Let me just see how. I've been in there for a while, so I can't remember how to get there. Let me see. Join our Slack group. It's just here. So you can just say join our Slack group, and then it will take you over to the process to join the Slack group. But I really, really highly recommend that, actually, because I've learned so much from the other people. I've made friends there. I've made friends that help me with different things that I'm struggling with, which I'm going to go over an example of. But anyway, so in this particular example, the person wanted to have a button show. Let's say, for example, it was in a kickout page. In this particular example, maybe it wouldn't make sense to have a button here and a button here. But let's say, for example, the two requirements that this person had was that they needed to have a button that was not changing the CSS of everything else. The CSS needed to be different from the standard one that comes from the Learning Center in Gavel, which I'll show you in a second. And it needed to open in its own page. So these were a couple of these different requirements for this particular person's example. Now, I knew how to do this from the Learning Center, in the sense that I knew one way of doing this from in the Learning Center, which is to have this configuration here where you have an action button, HTML, then you have where you want it to go, and then you have a label. And this looks fine. So if we actually put this one in this test here, for example, we can see how they look next to each other. So let's just say this is how it's going to be, because this is, we don't need any like variables or anything. So it looks like this, which kind of matches here, right? So the styling matches here. And when you click on it, it goes into another page and turns green. Now, what the person wanted, like I said, is that they wanted to be able to style this particular one, and they wanted, or the button that they're using, and they wanted it to open in its own page. So there was a suggestion by someone else that was that you could have it be an image, and then have like for example, you can style the button in a particular way that you want and then turn it into an image that somebody could then click on, and so on and so on. But actually, like that wouldn't actually function or look really like a button, although it's a creative solution. So I wanted to show this person how they could actually put a real button like this into their workflow. Now, mine still isn't even a perfect solution, and there's more that I can still learn, but this is one way that somebody could accomplish the things that were part of the requirements that they were asking about. So in this particular example, what I did was I also thought about this idea of stuff that I had learned through taking different courses, but also I tried a million different times in different ways to try to get the styling within here, but I couldn't figure it out. So I was doing a lot of searching on Stack Overflow and doing lots of different like search keywords and stuff. And it kind of came down to this question here: how do I make an HTML link look like a button? Because I was finding that there was a HTML button, but this particular one was hard to figure out how to turn this into a link. So it would give you this particular, let's just show you, for example. So it would show you like this, a button that says click me, and it looks like a button and behaves like a button. But I couldn't figure out at the time how to get it to link off anywhere. So I just kept searching around, and came across this one, how to make an HTML link look like a button. So this would be something where you have an href and an anchor link, and then you have your link inside here. Then you make a class, which doesn't have to be button, it could be something else, and then you have your text here. Now, the reason why I said earlier that this isn't a perfect, most beautiful solution is that when you hover over it, it still has like an underline, whereas this one doesn't and this one doesn't. So obviously there's still some work that could be done here. But the point is that you're trying to find solutions in lots of different ways. And you also need to kind of balance like how much time you're going to spend versus the like outcome that you're trying to get. So it's like the value of the outcome that you're going to, is this good enough for what you're trying to do? Does it accomplish the goal? Do we want to spend another couple of hours trying to figure out how to make this work the way we want it to? Maybe yes, maybe no. So in this particular case, the point is that I tested a couple different things. I utilized the resources that were available to me. I utilized some of the experience that I had before, and then read through different forums like Stack Overflow, communities that were dealing with this particular issue in the past, looked at lots of different solutions that were given here, and went with one that made the most sense, and that when I tested it, it worked. So this is an example of being able to, in the sense that you can like search for help using certain, obviously, like keywords, and also utilizing and taking advantage of things like community forums. So the next thing I wanted to go over is that idea of observing. So this idea is, the first one is like kind of like starting with what you know, right? What I know is that I'm able to use lots of different languages within this Scabble editor. So it doesn't just read like plain text or just show plain text. You can also actually do coding within here if you wanted to and add different elements. Whether you need to or have to or not is a different question. But I think in this particular example, it just shows that I started with the knowledge that I could put HTML in here if I wanted to. And then I kind of built on top of that, which was I've observed also that when I put these different pieces in, that it can behave like a button. So the other piece of this is actually to think about how we can strip things down to functions over labels. So outside of the research piece, I wanted to go into a second workflow kind of question here, which will really show this example of stripping things down to their functions over their labels. So another great question in the Slack community will really illustrate this point, which is around this idea of, can I use variables and logic in the subject line of the automated emails that you can configure within your workflows? So in this particular example, I just have really basic, same thing with here with this testing environment, just keeping it really simple, which is that I wanted to be able to answer this question about this customized message email automation template and how you can do this. And this is going to illustrate a couple of different points. So the question was, can I use variables and logic in the subject line of my email automation template? So the answer is yes, but there's two different ways, or maybe more, that you can do this. So the first way that I wanted to show that illustrates the point of functions over labels, but then the second point of, is it really the best way, should be another question, is that there is a help article that's really helpful about PDFs and logic within PDFs. So let me see if I can find it. It's this one here, Fields and Logic in PDFs. And on here, you can see that you can add logic and calculations to fields such as if client show client name if the role variable is exactly equal to defendant, otherwise show the spouse's name. So we can do this if we say enter text and put that particular line of code into the field. Now I can show you what this would look like if we go into output documents, I can go into here. And what you would do is you would come to the field that you want to tag this to, go to enter text, and then you would put that configuration into here like this. So you would say client name if blah, blah, blah. Now, what I wanted to show is one that you can do it the way that this is actually referring to fields and logics in PDFs, but you can actually take that same code because you're understanding the function of it instead of just seeing it as very specifically the how to do one specific thing, meaning like, although it says this is for fields and logic in PDFs, that doesn't mean that it can't be used anywhere else, and that's the only place that it can be used. In this particular example, we wanted to try to use something like that here in the email automation template subject line, and it turns out that you can just use the exact same structure and the exact same variables in the exact same way and form here in the subject line. Now, the reason why you don't see it here is that I started with that example, showed that person how to do it that way if they wanted to, but then wanted to show them that just because you can do something some particular way doesn't mean it's that it's the most efficient way. So even though it works, it doesn't mean that you should use it. So there might be a better way to do that particular thing. So in this particular case, I think that it's a better use to use invisible logic instead, where you just call to the variable that you created and you do the invisible logic in the back end, which you should be able to do for most situations. So in this particular case, we're saying if the preferred first name variable is blank, then I want this variable, which is colloquial first name, to equal the first name variable. Otherwise, or else if the preferred first name is not empty, then I want this particular variable, colloquial first name, to equal the preferred first name instead. So if somebody's name is Brittany, but they go by Louise, we want to go by whatever they want to be called rather than just their legal name. So I wanted to be able to show that there's multiple ways to do something often, and you want to consider that even though something can be done a certain way, it doesn't mean that it's the most efficient or the best way to do that. So you want to consider, I think I wrote down like something that said something like, it worked, hooray, but is there a better way? So it worked, great, like awesome, we were able to get this to work. Is that where we stop, or should we consider one step next, which is there a better way to do this? So there's another example here, which is like this particular conditions within PDFs and logic, but also around this idea of, I have another example written down here. I'm just struggling because I can't remember why I put it down here, but I'm going to skip that example actually. But this idea that it worked, hooray, but is there a better way? So keep that in mind when you're going through and testing different things, because even though you were able to get something to work, it doesn't automatically mean that it's the best thing that you should be using. Great. So let's go on to another piece of what I wanted to share with you. Let me see. Oh, one of the things that I think is a really good thing to keep in mind when you are trying to troubleshoot something and do something you haven't done before is to, let's say you're troubleshooting something and it's not working the way you want it to, and you're not really sure why it's not working. One thing you can do is, I think it's, where does this come from? One of these things is not like the other. Yeah, so this is from Sesame Street. So this idea of one of these things is not like the other, and recognizing the differences in different things, I think is a really important, especially for Gabble developers or for other people who are doing development work where it's very specific, and even obviously in anything. But in a particular case where I was trying to help someone in the community where they were using a repeating item and they were trying to, I think they were trying to refer to the next child or something like that. And there's two examples I can show here. That's the first one, and then I'll show you that. I'll think about the second one in a second. But the first one was around this idea of they were trying to use a repeating item let's say, for example, I'll just show you like a quick example of what I mean here. So let's pretend that I have this repeating item and I have it to where there's something like, it looks something like this, where it's like, I can't remember exactly, but let's call it child one. And then it's like something like name or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but let's just say it's this, just for the sake of this particular example. And it will be more obvious because we're very specifically talking about it. But when this is in the middle of lots of different code and you've got lots of different stuff going on, it can be hard to see and easy to miss. So in this particular example, the person somehow had it to where I think it was like this. So for some reason, whether they accidentally put it in this way or there was some error that made it to where it was inserted this way, when I was trying to help them with this, I was just looking to see what's different from the picture that I see that they've sent and what's different from when I was doing this myself. And a lot of the time it comes down to something invisible, like a space, obviously like this, or maybe like somebody has accidentally capitalized something or made something that was supposed to be capitalized lowercase, or something that is very tiny, like a period or something like that, where it's really hard to tell like what the difference is. But one of the first things that you can do when you're trying to figure out why something isn't working, for example, or you're trying something for the first time and you're not really sure why it's not outputting the way that you expected it to, you can look for whether one thing is not like the other. So in that particular case, I just told him, try taking out the spaces that are around this particular variable, because I think that that's what's causing the issue. And if it's not, we'll try something else. So that's the other thing too, is to try one difference at a time. So for example, oh, I think I know what you mean. What I meant earlier when I was going to refer to another example, which is this idea that we want to try one thing at a time when we're troubleshooting something. So if we say something like, for example, try taking out these spaces, and also why don't you at the same time in the same test try doing this and then try doing this, because if you do that, it makes it to where it's really hard to know which thing was the thing that made it work. So if we try one thing at a time, where we say, in this first test, I want you to take off the spaces that you have here, then to retest it and let me know how that goes. Okay, that didn't work. Why don't you try adding a space here and try adding a space here and here in the next test, or whatever else. So you can build slowly on top of that. And you also want to track what you've done so far. So the reason I was kind of saying in the example where I was saying it worked, hooray, but is there a better way, was mostly around the side of when I was trying to get Mailgun set up with my Gavel account and using it as a way of automating emails that come with my own brand rather than the Gavel brand, so somebody can recognize that it's from me. We did a lot of different tests together and in emails, but it made it to where at the end of the day, we kind of jumbled it up to where I didn't know which thing worked and which combination of things worked. So we had to kind of lock it in, go back and say like, okay, what was it that worked in this particular scenario? Okay, it was this one, and this one. But maybe it would have been better if we had, in my case, if I had tracked what we'd already done, and before we made a change, said like, okay, this is the last one that we've done. Okay, that one didn't work. Let's try the next one. Because we just got, like, in my case, I just got a little bit desperate at the end. It was like, just try this one, try that one, try this one. So that was a lesson for me to make sure that I'm paying attention to what our last iteration of test was, testing one different change at a time, going along with those principles of really paying attention to those differences. And then the next piece I wanted to show you is around something else that I don't know as well, but I could still see this difference of this idea that you would look for the thing that's different. So in the Slack group, I'm just going to try to pull up the question here really quick so that I can find specifically what it was talking about. So it was a question that said, let me go to it really quick. So basically there was a thread that talks about how they said, getting some issues and wondering if anyone can give some suggestion. I have the following variable for a yes, no. So I have a yes, no question with a particular variable. And they are trying to use the API documentation to make this push through to something else. So when I looked at it, I didn't know how to do this, but I could see that the actual first section has I'll just show you this quickly on Zoom so you can see what I'm saying. So in this particular example, this is the one that this person shared with us, which is the idea that you have this line here that says true. And then when you're looking at the error message and it's trying to point to where there's a problem, you can see this section here, failure to assemble string object has no attribute true values. Now, the first thing I noticed when I saw this is that true over here is capitalized and true over here is lowercase. But I didn't know enough about the rest of this context to feel confident in answering, you should probably lowercase the t, because I didn't know if this was something that they could change or not. So this was something that I noticed and could have said something about, but I didn't want to look stupid in front of everybody. But it turns out that for others, they said, this is somebody from the team, for a yes, no variable in the body like that, you just need to put in the text true, no quotes or capital letters. So variable name true. So that was what I saw and thought, but it's not what I said because I was scared of being wrong. So that's another thing to learn as well, which is like, sometimes you're right, even though you think you're wrong, because you see the answer clearly in front of you, but you're insecure with what you don't know, and you don't want to be ridiculed by everyone or thought of as being not smart or whatever else. So I think that that's something we can all take away and remember, is that it's okay to be like wrong, and that fear of failure can really hold us back from actually like helping someone, because I could have given him the answer faster if I said, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but I could be wrong. So that's something that you can think about as well. Okay, let me just see if there was anything else I wanted to share with you. Okay, so actually this last part is going to, let me just make sure I covered. For the tears part, I just wrote, it's okay to lose hope and walk away for a sec, because there was just a point where I was just like, this isn't working. I don't get it. I'm not sure what to do. Literally like started crying. So like, it's okay to have a meltdown. It's completely fine. Like I've had them many times. You're going to get over it. Maybe it will help you get over it because you can just have a good cry, then let it go and walk away. So in this particular next part, we're going to talk about this piece about patience, and that's going to be the last thing we'll discuss for this particular episode. So when it comes to this idea of patience, obviously it comes in the sense of we should be patient with ourselves, we should be patient with the systems, we should be patient with our trial and error and failing first and fast and often and so on and so forth. But actually, sometimes you just need to be patient with the systems themselves to catch up to the changes that you've made. So this is something that I kind of went into a spiral of despair because I was trying to do something like immediately after I made a change in a different system and having them try to talk to each other. And it just took like a few minutes or maybe like an hour for the system to kind of like catch up to itself. And I thought it was like all broken and wrong. And I was like, no, everything is based on this one thing. So the two examples I want to share with this are Clio custom variables as well as Mailgun setups. So in Clio, if you have it, you can see that you're able to add custom fields. So if we go into settings, we go over to custom fields, we see that we can make matter custom fields and contact custom fields. And we can add them, we can have them be lots of different types of things. And then you can actually use these in combination with Gavel using Zapier, for example. And so in this particular case, I wanted to have a particular repeating item question, feed information into Zapier. So from Gavel into Zapier, that will populate a custom field within Clio. So in this particular example, I think it was a matter, and I wanted the custom field to, let me just double check. Data, matter type, data, matter area, and description. Maybe it was this one. Let me just see. Other parties, and it was like basically something like this. I'm not sure if this is exactly the one I was looking for. I might have deleted it because out of frustration. But anyway, so I was trying to make it to where I had, when a workflow is completed in Gavel, I want you to take those variables and populate into Clio. That's a custom field. So I had just set up the custom field. I thought it was I could see the custom field actually in Zapier. And I tried it like 18 different times and with different kind of iterations of that particular thing. And I even like reached out to a friend to say, like, I made a custom variable. I can see it in Zapier. It's not feeding through. It keeps giving me an error. Like, what's going on? Have you ever experienced this? And he was just like, he was like going through the different support ticket that he sent to the Zapier people to say, hey, this isn't working or whatever else. And while he was reading through it, he said that in his own messages to them was he sent something at like, let's say 10:58, and then by 11 he wrote, oh, never mind, it looks like it fixed itself. So it needed like 2 more extra minutes for it to just catch up to what he was trying to do. And so that's the same thing that happened with me. While he was saying that, and I had already been struggling with this for like an hour, I went into Zapier, tried again, and I was like, it worked. And so it was like this beautiful moment where all I needed to do was have a tiny bit of patience, walk away from it for like an hour, just give it a second to catch up to what I was just doing. Even though I could see it, it was just saying that it couldn't see the custom field ID. So I was like, no, but it's there. You can see it. You're populating it. You're showing me the ID right here. It just needed a second. So sometimes with these systems, you just need them a second, to give them a second and have a little bit of patience so they can talk to each other and catch up to what you're trying to do. The other example that I had is with Mailgun as well. So when I keep referring to Mailgun, I just am talking about a system that allows you to kind of change up a few things. Let me just show you what it looks like for the end user. So for example, normally what happens is when you send, let's say you assign a person a workflow, or you send them some documents based on an automation at the end, and even as like a system generated email to the end user or client or whoever you've assigned this particular thing to, or whoever's in that particular situation, whoever you're trying to send an email to from Gavel, basically. It normally says Gavel right here. And then when you click into it, this section here from would be Gavel, and then no reply at mail.docautomation.org. So I wanted it to be branded from Cormeum, so my person that's looking at this would know it's from me and not from Gavel, because they don't know who Gavel is, and that this would be from my type of branding and server, or my particular domain. So the way that you can do that is with a tool called Mailgun. And so once you configure this all together, let me actually just get out of here for a second. Once you configure that all together, you'll be able to have that set up correctly. So as I mentioned previously, I was working with the Gavel team like tirelessly for like a while, trying to just figure out like what I was missing and like how it wasn't working. And we kind of like let it sit for a second, and we were like, okay, let's just like walk away from it for a minute and like go do other things and live our lives for a second, and then like come back to it. And I actually accidentally figured this out, and it was because I have my demo account linked to HubSpot. And when I was going in here, I saw that I had a new so my email of demo@command.pro, I had it set up to where my emails got automatically added to here. And I saw hello@mail.com.pro. And I said, what? How did that get in there? And I realized that this actually worked. So this is a previous version and iteration of our setup where instead of saying Chromium, it said Chromium.pro. Instead of instead of no reply at mail.chromium.pro, I had it at hello@mail.chromium.pro. So this is obviously like an old version, but it worked. So it was just by chance that I had sent an email automation through the Gavel system that made it to where I just happened to look at HubSpot and see that it finally caught up. And it was just like a pre-Christmas miracle that we figured it out. So that's just to say, sometimes it's not you. Like sometimes the system just needs a second to catch up on what you were trying to have it do. So I hope that this has been useful with a little bit of different strategies for troubleshooting and doing things that you've never done before and how to know what you don't know. As I mentioned, like I'm not perfect at all of this. I'm still learning. I'm not a full stack developer that knows everything about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, Ruby, and all these different things. But I do know enough to like kind of figure out a way to make something happen that we're trying to do, how to try to research different things, how to take a second to walk away and try something else, or let the system catch up to itself. But hopefully this has been useful. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you my contact information in a moment, but I really appreciate your time and attention. I'm just going to go over a few announcements before we wrap up, which is that this has been an episode of the Wednesday Build, which has live episodes every Wednesday. I also have Code Word Hacks, which has new issues out every Tuesday. The Tuesday Forecast newsletter is free and comes out every Tuesday. You're welcome to sign up for that as well. For Gavel, we have certification courses at chromiumacademy.com, which you can check out. We actually have the Core 4 cohort starting tomorrow, which is going to be the first ones to use the completely revised Gavel Silver version. So we're starting with Basics Week, we'll go into Silver Week, then we'll go into Gold, go through the test, and then we'll have our graduation. So you're welcome to join us. We're starting at 10 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday, August 3rd. 2023, and you're welcome to join us. So for our courses, we also have courses in Software and Airtable, a certification course in Go Full Page, and more to come. You're welcome to also join our community, which is free along with all of these different pieces. And then as you saw, we have a very active Slack group within the Gavel community, which you're welcome to join for free as well. So thank you again for being here with me live. And for those of you that are on the recording, hello. And our next one is going to be Wednesday, the 9th of August. I'm actually going to be coming back from Norway that day, so I might need to adjust this a little bit, so I will let you know. And we're going to be talking about scalable tech stack of the solopreneur, what to use for your website and domain, CRM, LMS, newsletter, booking calendar, and more. So I'm going to be sharing what I use and all of these different pieces. And my goal is to help you to be able to have time, location, and financial freedom so that you can work from anywhere as much or as little as you want, support your family, and travel. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or via email at brittany@chromium.pro. You can also reach out to me at brittany@gavel.io for any inquiries related to Gavel's law school program, which I love to run. So that is all for this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye, everyone.